He didn't walk into that room expecting cameras. He wasn't dressed to impress. He wore borrowed shoes, a shirt 2 sizes too big, and a silence that spoke louder than applause ever could. He wasn't there to charm. Or to play it safe. He came carrying the weight of kids whose names no one knew, whose stories never made it past the corner store, whose talent never reached a stage or a spotlight. That day, in a room lined with portraits of presidents and polished power, he brought a single pawn and placed it on the board. Not to impress. Not to be remembered. But to speak for those still waiting to be seen. He didn't come for glory. He came for something heavier. And in the most powerful room in the world, he made them listen. Before we continue, what country or city are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you are watching from. Hit the like button and subscribe to enjoy more of our videos. His name wasn't spoken with excitement. It wasn't whispered in locker rooms or printed on glossy flyers. There were no early interviews, no talent scouts circling the neighborhood. The only thing that knew his schedule was the streetlight outside his window, flickering every night at 8:03, right as he opened his second-hand phone and studied moves most people twice his age couldn't memorize. His room wasn't quiet, it never was. Shouts from upstairs. Sirens 3 blocks away. A baby crying next door. And yet, somehow, within all that noise, he found strategy. Calm. Purpose. His board wasn't made of ivory or glass. Just a plastic foldable grid, frayed along the middle, set on a cracked milk crate beside a couch held up by bricks. No coach ever sat beside him. His lessons came from paused YouTube videos, blurry screenshots, and late-night replays he watched over and over again until the battery blinked red. Some mornings, he walked to school replaying entire matches in his head. Each step, another calculated turn. Each hallway, another chance to stay invisible. He was the quiet one. The kid teachers forgot to call on. But when his fingers touched the pieces, something happened, something they couldn't measure with grades or behavior slips. He didn't raise his hand in class. He didn't wear expensive shoes. But when he sat at that lunch table with a folded paper board and challenged kids between bites of cold cafeteria food, they stopped laughing. They leaned in. They watched. And for the first time, someone started keeping score. The local competition wasn't held in a grand hall. It took place in a crowded gym with flickering lights and folding chairs that creaked beneath every movement. No spectators. No live streams. Just boys and girls with game faces and backpacks under their seats. When he entered, some barely looked up. A few smirked at his worn-out sneakers and chipped board. He didn't bring fancy gear or a team jacket. He brought memory. He brought logic layered with instinct. And when the clock started ticking, so did his climb. Round after round, players who had studied in elite clubs found themselves outmaneuvered by someone who'd never even played on a regulation table. His moves weren't loud. They were precise. And by the final match, no one laughed when he sat down. When he won, there was no confetti, no anthem, just a hush, the kind that follows something undeniable. The kind that doesn't need explaining. A volunteer handed him a ribbon. A teacher offered a ride home. Unknown to him, a man in suit noted the game. A week later, the man returned in a coat and tie showed up at school. He held an envelope bearing a seal, not local, not state, but federal. One by one, teachers peeked out of classrooms. Whispers moved faster than the bell. His mother opened the letter first. She didn't say a word. Just sat down at the kitchen table and held it like it might vanish. She'd seen a lot in that apartment. But nothing like this. An invitation. Not to compete. To visit. To be seen. The place? Washington. The building? The one they watched on TV but never imagined stepping inside. He'd never been on a plane. Never owned a suitcase. But suddenly, a tailor was measuring his shoulders. A photographer asked for a headshot. And for the first time, the world outside his block asked for his name, and meant it. He didn't look out the airplane window to admire clouds, he was too focused on keeping his breathing steady. The suit itched. The collar pressed against his neck like it didn't belong there. His fingers never stopped adjusting the cuff of his sleeve, a habit formed long before cameras ever pointed his way. In D.C., the city moved differently. Wide streets. Flags waving from stone buildings. Security checkpoints that didn't ask questions, they scanned, they nodded, they moved on. The building they led him into had ceilings higher than any he'd ever seen. Every hallway whispered of power, polished floors, guarded doors, and eyes that weighed him without words. No one told him where to sit. He stood until someone gestured. The table was long. Heavy. Decorated with pens that cost more than his rent and nameplates engraved in gold. Across from him, men with folded hands. Women with precise haircuts and practiced smiles. Portraits watched from the walls, leaders from another time, dressed in war uniforms and ceremonial robes. Their expressions frozen. Their stories hanging overhead like shadows. He didn't speak right away. He listened. The way he always had. Letting silence stretch. Letting them wonder what he would say. In his pocket was a note. Folded 3 times. Written in pencil. Just a few lines he'd memorized but still kept close, like armor. He had no media team. No advisor whispering tactics. Just the weight of an entire block behind him, the cracked courts, the broken glass, the chessboard with missing pawns, the little brother who waved as he left, not knowing if he'd ever come back with more than a story. They thought he'd ask for a scholarship. A program. A sponsorship deal. That's what usually came next, a handshake, a headline, maybe a quote printed beneath a smiling photo. But when the moment arrived, he didn't smile. He didn't reach for the microphone placed in front of him. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a pawn, plastic, scratched, light enough to forget, heavy enough to carry memory. He placed it gently in the center of the polished table. And then he spoke. His voice wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. It carried the urgency of classrooms missing teachers. Gyms used as shelters. Libraries locked by budget cuts. He asked for desks. Not for him, for kids who sat on the floor to finish homework. He asked for light. For corners of the city that went dark long before sunset. He asked for protection, not with force, but with opportunity. Places where brilliance didn't have to beg to be noticed. He told them about Emmanuel, who solved equations faster than anyone but hadn't owned a calculator since 7th grade. About Layla, who wrote stories in the margins of old phone bills because paper wasn't free. He didn't ask for applause. He didn't pause to check their reactions. He spoke as if he'd waited his whole life for this window to open, and knew it might never open again. Around him, chairs shifted. Breaths held. Pens stopped moving. Even the room, so used to speeches and statements, fell into stillness. And when he finished, he looked up. Not to impress. Not to plead. Just to remind them he was still there, and so were the kids he carried with him. That pawn, still resting between water glasses and untouched notepads, said what words couldn't: we're here. We always have been. Why did it take so long to see us? He didn't wait for a response. He stood. Collected the envelope he hadn't opened. Nodded once. And walked away. No photos. No promises. Down the hall, his footsteps echoed against marble. Past portraits of leaders he didn't grow up reading about. Past guards who straightened their posture as he passed, unsure whether to salute or stay still. Outside, the air hit different. Crisp. Wide. Free from scripts. He didn't look back. Not because he was ungrateful, but because he'd said everything he came to say. Inside, the room didn't resume its rhythm. Conversation didn't pick up. No one reached for their notes. The pawn remained exactly where he left it. Quiet. Centered. Impossible to ignore. That day, he didn't leave with connections. He didn't receive funding. No building was renamed in his honor. But something shifted. Behind him, one official quietly made a call to a school district. Another requested data on after-school programs. Small moves, unseen by most, began that very hour. And miles away, back in his neighborhood, kids leaned closer to chessboards. Volunteers arrived where no one had bothered before. A mural began to take shape, not of him, but of hands, lifting pawns, lighting candles, writing futures. Change doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers. And when the right ears are listening, even a whisper can move mountains. He didn't go to the Capitol looking for a stage. He brought no banners. He started no chants. And still, he sparked something. Because real brilliance doesn't always wear a title. It's found in overlooked corners, whispered through cracked doors, passed between hands that are tired but still creating. And somewhere, right now, maybe in your school, maybe on your street, there's another kid learning alone, solving puzzles in silence, waiting for a room that doesn't just invite, but listens. If this story stayed with you, don't let it end here. Hit the like button if you believe someone like him should never be invisible again. Subscribe to this channel if you know the world needs more stories like his, and fewer reasons to ignore them. Because sometimes, all it takes, is a pawn.